season, we have had a little over a week of fall camp, which means we're getting some storylines from what we're hearing in fall camp. And I know you've been kind of talking about some of these things. And even when you were on the show last, we discussed this about the importance of passing more in practices. Harbaugh saying that the offense was going to be 50-50 instead of 60-40 towards the run. That was a very notable quote because we know Harbaugh likes to run the ball. And what we've heard so far is that the Michigan offense is, in fact, passing more. Got a quote from Zach Zinner here. I can promise you we've passed the ball a lot these last few practices. And so given the fact that you have said, I believe you had predicted potentially that Michigan will lead the entire country in points per game, I would love to kind of hear your take on if they do all this passing in practice and gel, how that might lead to leading the country.
Yeah, that sounds pretty hot when you lay it out there like that they're going to lead the country in scoring. But, last year they were top 6 to top 5 most of the year. So it's not that big of a stretch. Tennessee was number 1. They don't have their quarterback anymore. So with what Michigan brings back and the schedule that they have, in particular the non-conference slate, they should be able to pile up some points. So I think that they can get to 42, 43 points. And I think that be pretty close to leading the country. And it sounded a lot better than saying, yeah, I think Michigan can be number 3, take 3 spots up, score a couple more points, and maybe be the third leading scoring team in the country. Why not just say, let's shoot the moon and say that they're going to be the top.
Put your, Wolf of Wall Street style, get in there.
Yeah. So I think they can do that. I don't think that, the Harbaugh's saying that they would like to be 50-50. And when they look back, they'll probably be 50-50. I don't think they're going to be 50-50, but I do think that they're going to throw the ball more. Their quarterback's coming back for his second full season. They also know that if the idea, and it is now to not necessarily we can look past Ohio State and the Big Ten and look to the college football playoff, but if they get to the college football playoff and they really do want to beat Georgia or Alabama, whoever else is in there, you got to be able to do everything. And, part of that is going to be throwing the football. And so they, I believe that during the season, they are going to look to air it out a little bit more. Now, airing it out a little bit more, if they connected last year on some of the passes that they were trying to hook up with downfield, they would have had more impressive passing statistics at that point, because most of the year, as you probably talked about, like that was the one hitch in their giddy up, that they didn't have a dangerous downfield passing game and that they couldn't push the ball down the field. They couldn't take the top off of defenses. And with JJ coming back and finally, putting the ball on the receivers and then the receivers actually hauling them in, that's going to be the idea. And then bumping that up a little bit. I mean, you want to be the best team in the country, being able to do everything on the field. That's what, that's the idea. But if we're just sitting around talking, you say, hey, what's Michigan's bread and butter? What are they known for? Well, they're known for being able to run the football. And if your best players, if we're sitting around talking about them, as part of Zach Zinter and that offensive line, the line wants to dominate and physically wear down the opponent, and they want to run the ball. And the best 2 players on that offense, JJ is the quarterback and everything, but we know it's Blake and we know it's Donovan Edwards. So they're going to be going to those 2, and it's worked pretty well. I would say supplemented by a passing game and a dangerous passing game. And, there's a lot of people that have taken notice in what Michigan has done the last 2 years, John. And if it wasn't, if it was 1 year, it was 1 year, but 2 years, it was Nick Saban after SEC Media Days. Since I talked with you last, I remember he was talking to ESPN afterwards, and he was talking about his new offensive coordinator, Reese from Notre Dame. And he said, I'll paraphrase it, but he said, the worm is turned. It's about dominating the line of scrimmage and being able to control the ball and running the football. And you're going to see a little bit more of that, a concerted effort down in Tuscaloosa. And he might as well have just said, look, Jim Harbaugh has changed things around in college football.
Yeah. And listen, nobody's claiming that that Michigan is going to be, turn into USC and or Ohio State, and like, okay, now we're just going to pass all the time. Of course, the running game is still going to be a dominant part. You're going to see Blake Corum. I think in the first couple of games, you're going to see a lot of Donovan Edwards and Ben Hall. I don't think they're going to be playing Blake Corum in the fourth quarter against the East Carolina Pirates unless things go real topsy turvy. But when we get to games called Penn State, when we get to games called Ohio State, maybe a team called Georgia or Alabama, if Michigan is lucky enough to get that far, you can't just run the ball because they know how to stop the run better than any. Georgia knows how to stop the run better than anybody. You gotta sling it. Ohio State demonstrated that in the playoff game. They it was a midnight kick away, and it was because they were able to gash Georgia's defense in terms of the pass game when they were able to stop that run. So I think the pass is really important when you get to those tougher games in the season. So if it's even close to 50-50, and at least 50-50 in those games, if not 50-50 against East Carolina, UNLV, Bowling Green, or Rutgers, maybe that's the thing.
Yeah, it's fun to talk about, but you mentioned Ohio State last year. If we really break down that game, midway through the second quarter, Michigan was able to stay in that game, take the lead. It was because of the passing game. JJ McCarthy hit Cornelius Johnson twice. He had the 69-yarder, then he had the 75-yarder. And in the second half, it was the same way. The stats end up getting a little bit skewed, and maybe it gets a little bit different because everybody remembers Donovan Edwards going for 75 yards and 85 yards there at the end. But he was put in position to do all of that because McCarthy, his ability to throw the football, and then he started the second half out, the first drive, finding Colston Loveland on a 45-yard pass, touchdown pass, which, during the previous games, you didn't have these big splash plays. And then, there they were sitting with three of them at Ohio State. So you definitely could say the pass opened up the run. If you really want to say, look, is Michigan going to throw the football? Say, in big games, what do you think they did last year against the Buckeyes? That's true. That's the reason that they did that. So.
Yeah, and it felt like, and unless you're talking about Hawaii or some of those early games against the Cupcakes, when Michigan started hitting conference play, what it felt like is the pass game was it started like here, and then it started getting closer and closer to gelling, and then luckily the Ohio State game is when it really came together, and the like you mentioned, the two big plays to Cornelius Johnson. That's really, I think, what was a key turning point. And if that continues into this year, then I think we're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, well, it did continue in Indianapolis the next week in the Big Ten Championship game, and I don't know, TCU still is, a thorn in everybody's side. You start talking about that game because Michigan they should have won that game. They were a big favorite. They get to the championship game. We know they didn't, but. JJ, you can't really take away the two pick sixes because, you could essentially say that cost Michigan the game. I'm not going to argue with you on that, but, you
got the Buckeye trolls in here reminding us of the pick sixes, of course.
Well, they got a point. He also threw the ball around a little bit. There were like 5 plays in that game. If they didn't have the Philly special, the 2 pick sixes, there was the fumble on the goal line. There was the 76-yarder that they gave up on a 3rd and 7. I think if any of those 5 plays, if they go Michigan's way, I still think I think that Michigan would have won that game. I know it's easy to say now. I believe it though. Go through any of those 5, but it's that last game, so you always remember that one. And oh yeah, it was a pretty big game. So it's one to think about and contemplate all off season. It's good. It's a way to get to September so you can start putting that one behind you.